Hello and welcome back. We're going to start today with topic six, which is looking at absolutism as a form of government that arose in Europe in the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, and also the growing revolutions that began to take place in Europe, political revolutions, mainly the English Civil War, the American Revolution, and the French Revolution are what we're going to look at in this particular topic. Today, we're going to look at Spain and France and how they developed the concept of absolute monarchies during the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries. Um, First, let's define what we mean by absolutism. By the 1500s, after the discovery of the New World, there were many nation states that were developing in Western Europe. They were larger countries. They had a very strong centralized government. They unified a large area, sometimes peacefully, sometimes through military subjugation. And the rulers of these new nation states developed this concept of divine right, that they were placed there by God and that they had the authority from God. So they didn't have to answer to anyone, not nobles, not a representative body, only to God. So a very, very unique perspective on authority, that to question them is to question God. With Spain, the dynasty that governed Spain in this time period were the Habsburgs. They were from Austria, and this happened because of dynastic marriages. The Spanish royal family had intermarried into the Austrian royal family, and they in turn gained a huge amount of territory, both in Europe and in other parts of the world. In the early 1500s, you can see the areas that Spain actually controlled. So they were very powerful in Europe. They were powerful globally. Um, Two Habsburg rulers I want you to be familiar with are Charles V. He was Holy Roman Emperor. He was the emperor at the time of Martin Luther, and he's the one that actually oversaw the Diet of Worms that condemned Luther. But Luther was only part of his problem. He also had the Turks that were pushing at his eastern borders, and he had a very, very large, extensive territory that was very difficult to control. In the interest of efficiency, when he died, he actually divided this territory between two of his sons. One of his sons, Philip II, became king of Spain, who saw himself as a guardian of the Catholic Church. This is at the height of the Reformation, so there was a lot of religious tension that was going on. He saw himself as a defender of the Catholic Church, persecuted Protestants, pretty much made sure that Spain was Protestant free. He also was involved with fighting with the Ottoman Turks and actually defeated them near Greece in the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. So he actually curbed the expansion of the Turks into Europe. He also had to deal with a revolt of the Netherlands, which was largely Protestant, and they broke away finally in the 1600s. Of course, probably the most failed example of what Philip attempted to do was conquer England in 1588, launched a huge fleet of ships that was called the Armada in an unsuccessful attempt to throw Queen Elizabeth I off the throne and put a Catholic ruler on the English throne. So, and after Philip died, he micromanaged things to such a degree that his successors weren't as effective as he was as a ruler. And so Spain starts this decline and continues this decline well into the 19th century. This is a time, though, of military weakness with Spain. By the 1600s, they basically weren't keeping up with the times. They had huge inflation. They were only dependent upon gold coming from the New World. There wasn't a whole lot of manufacturing going on, and their military had gotten very, very out of date. So that was part of what caused them to decline. This was also the period of their golden age during Philip II's reign. El Greco as a Mannerist painter, and we're going to look at some examples of his work. And one of the very first Western European novels, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. France, up until the late 1500s, was actually torn by civil conflict, particularly wars of religion. The Catholics and the Huguenot Protestants were constantly fighting with each other. And that kind of kept France from developing, you know, powerfully within Europe. This changed with the coronation of Henry IV, who actually converted from being a Huguenot to a Catholic in order to be king. He issued the Edict of Nantes, which granted toleration to Huguenots, and started France on this process of having more powerful kings and a more effective government. His son, Louis XIII, who became king as a child, was fortunate to have an advisor by the name of Cardinal Richelieu, who did much to increase the power of the monarchy by weakening both the power of the Huguenots and the nobility. We're going to talk about the 30 Years' War in lesson two, but France actually used the 30 Years' War to become the superpower in Europe. So while the king was weak, he had an advisor in Richelieu that made the monarchy very strong. And Louis's son, Louis XIV, became the most powerful monarch in Europe. He is known as the Sun King. He's usually given the distinction of being the best example as an absolute ruler. And under his rule, France starts to become a global power. They start to colonize. They start to economically become more involved with the affairs of Europe, particularly militarily. You can see within the notes here that an army of 300,000 men back then was quite large. He made France basically the example for the rest of Europe to follow. French culture became the height of culture. Ambassadors learned French, for example, and that was the language of diplomacy. Um, Unfortunately, Louis began to expand a little bit too far. Uh, he wasn't able to really control the spending, and so France was in trouble financially because of the wars and because of all the things that he was involved with Europe. He became so powerful that there actually was a war that was fought called the War of the Spanish Succession. His grandson was the next in line to the throne for France, and the other countries in Europe did not want Spain and France joined together. And so there was a conflict to make sure that that would not happen. So this balance of power was maintained. Another legacy of Louis XIV is that he ended the toleration that was given under his grandfather by revoking the toleration for Huguenots with the Treaty of Fontainebleau. Try to get that right. So, France was in a decline really after Louis XIV, and it's not really till the French and Indian War that they really are dealt a serious blow, but that decline starts at this point. So this concludes lesson one. I will continue on with lesson two as we talk about Austria, Prussia, and Russia. Thank you.